Yeah, that's pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, point at it. Someone get your finger in there.
That's all three right there.
Woo!
Not bad, Mrs. Rex.
As I say, Mrs. Rex is shooting pretty darn good.
Yeah, you girls are gonna really kick some butt. I'm excited. All right, Joe, you're up, brother.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to beat the chicks, man.
Oh man.
Hey guys, Rex here. You know, it's the subtleties sometimes that can really make a big difference in the overall picture, whether that be playing an instrument or learning how to write creative stories or implementing precision rifle fire. Those subtleties are what really can bite you in the butt or can make it awesome. And what I mean by that is it's easy enough to carry out the mechanical necessities of any given set of instructions, right? And so that's basically where most different shooting schools would probably leave off, is because to get people to that degree of knowledge and expertise does take quite a bit of time to get there. And for example, with military snipers or police marksmen or even, you know, civilian competitors, there's a lot of mechanics to remember. Handling of the weapon, how to dial in a basic firing solution, how to go through the process of establishing your 4 fundamentals of marksmanship and adhering to those as best you can. There's a whole giant world of infinite complexity there. And so it takes a long time to get up to the point where you have to start worrying about the tiny details. But really what separates the men from the boys is the tiny details. And that can go either way. That can either bite you in the butt or it can really help you out. And just an example of this deal is if you consider just the fundamentals of marksmanship, right? One of them is to establish a good natural point of aim and to get the rifle perfectly situated to where it's just naturally pointed right at the target, okay? And if you zoom in on that deal, you're gonna see that there's you're gonna see that there's like infinite different things that can potentially slightly screw that up. And with all that being said, sometimes you have to deal with those things and sacrifice worrying about those for a given shooting session, for a given spot in someone's training, to really get them to the point to handle some other bigger fish to fry. So it's really about a prioritization of technique to achieve the fundamentals, okay? And so what might look like an imperfect firing position for a given situation might be the best one you have at the time. For example, we just were out yesterday taking a brand new shooter, Miss Casey Day, and Mrs. Rex also. We're getting them to really start on the precision rifle training. We're going to do an experiment and we're going to take them from basically 0 to extremely deadly in a short amount of time. And that's our objective. And our intent is to maybe get them out to some of these different shooting competitions and watch them dominate. Because it's not going to be hard for them to do with the proper instruction. But for example, we took them out there, and Mrs. Rex is a very good shot. And she does a great job putting them in there. But maybe some of you would be surprised to know she's maybe got less than 50 rounds under her belt on a bolt action rifle with a scope on it. But she certainly does shoot well, as you could see some of the videos before, nailing water bottles for me right after I had my surgeries and stuff at like 900 whatever yards, right? And so, or shooting really good groups with the rifle. So really understanding how important the subtle details are is an important thing. But as a person who's coaching someone through that stuff, you got to kind of sometimes not worry about certain things to prioritize other things that are more important. So for her first 3 rounds, Miss Casey Day, that we took her out and tried to get her to just experience what it's like to fire a rifle for the first time, center fire rifle, because there's some muzzle blast, you got a muzzle brake on there, you know, on some of them, and there's recoil, and there's just a whole new experience. But I wanted it to be a really positive experience, something that would build confidence and also establish solid fundamentals, at least to some degree, with the first 3 shots. So what I did is we got out there and we did the basic super quick version of Rex's marksmanship speech and weapons familiarization speech. We started off from square one talking about like, okay, what is a bolt action rifle? This is the bolt, this is the action, here's the trigger guard, here's the trigger, Here's the heel, here's the toe of the buttstock. We will be referring to those. There's your muzzle end. Here's how the cartridges go in the magazine. Real basic stuff. Just a 5-minute crash course. She participates a lot in the series in terms of internet marketing and stuff like that, and just being a personality of the podcast show, and to be the person who is kind of the experimental test subject, if you will, to kind of come into this whole world while we document it. So from ground zero, absolute ground zero, to incredibly deadly is the objective of this particular little sub-operation we got going on. But to make a long story short, we gave her the 5-minute download of here's a rifle, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a 3-shot group. The rifle's ready zeroed. It's Axial Precision 6.5 Creedmoor with one of my Schmitz on there. And so the rifle's all totally set up. It's a good shooting rifle. All the bugs are worked out of it. But we want to establish just a basic understanding of how the fundamentals feel like, to build that initial muscle memory that she can take home later and digest, you know, and kind of remember that good experience. So I think it's a positive way to build it. It's like when I used to give guitar lessons to little kids back in the day. I would work like for an entire lesson just on one chord. Like in the first early days of the guitar, you need to explain what all the parts are. Here's the proper way to hold it up. Here's what you don't want to do. Here's what this hand does this hand is the rhythm hand, whatever, right? And here's how to hold an A minor, right? Or whatever chord you're trying to play. And you would just get exactly perfect. I want perfect tone. I don't want any strings being muffled. I want you to have maximum efficiency in the way your fingers situated just underneath the fret, so you don't have to smash down on the string or tweak it out of whack so that it comes out of tune. Those are the kind of subtle things I'm talking about, which translates directly over into running any kind of precision instrument, whether that be a musical instrument or a martial instrument, like a weapon, okay? And so by teaching someone who's at the first stages, giving them a snapshot picture, something to chew onto of like, this is exactly what's supposed to happen. And you spend a whole 5 minutes laying on the ground with 3 rounds, coaching them through, nitpicking, getting everything as good as you can for them for the first shot and then for the following 2. You never know exactly what's going to happen, because sometimes, you know, the first shot might be the scariest, or maybe the second and third shot are the scariest if they underestimated the overpressure situation, for example. So you don't know how that's all going to go, but that's why it's important to teach them those things right from the get-go, I think, in my opinion. So the instructional style of doing it like that is somewhat different than other styles, and that's why if you look at different tier 1 style operations where they really, really want people to be very good at what they do, whether that be music instruction or fighting or martial arts world, I mean, there's a lot of instruction that goes first into making sure people understand what they're about to get into, understanding the mindset, understanding the science of it, and just taking off a tiny, tiny baby-sized piece of it initially, something to chew on, so that when they come back a week later, for example, or a month later, whenever the next set of instruction is going to take place, that stuff has been fully digested and made a part of them. You know what I'm saying? And if you're taking experienced people out there, like where we're talking about like a real tier 1 operation, especially with rifles, I think it's important to go through the science in its infinite complexity and focus in on all the things that are going to rear their ugly head later on. And it's done in a classroom environment, in an instructional environment that's sitting down comfortably in a chair and listening and seeing what we're talking about before you get them in the field. Because if you get them in the field right away, there's a level of uncomfort, right? There's a level of discomfort, and environmental factors in the weather can be put you in a hurry. The adrenaline of having the weapon sometimes can be conducive to learning in certain ways, but in other ways you have to really have the science down. So it's a whole different skill set. And if you really, really want to master the subtleties, you have to kind of be prepared psychologically for them ahead of time, which means that you had plenty of time to digest the information and really implement those things in your imagination before you ever get out there. There was a gentleman, I don't remember who it was, but he was a POW at some point, and he was locked up in one of these little birdcage deals, you know, and they're mean to them guys, the POWs, and he had never played golf in his life. And what he did for the whole few years he was in that camp is he sat and imagined, okay, just to pass the time, horrible situation, how to play golf. And he kind of imagined, okay, here's a swing. He's seen people play it. He kind of understood the deal. Maybe he gave it one try sometime. And so for years he played golf in his head, just envisioning what's going to happen. And strangely enough, I wouldn't say this is the best way to learn golf, right? But strangely enough, when the guy eventually get out, he become a really good golfer. He kind of knew what he was doing right off the bat because he had really digested the feel and the spirit and the psychology of it. And I don't think that that's something that we're going to implement to that degree of insanity, right? We're not going to lock people up in cages and make them think about ballistics all day. But there is a certain level of envisioning and understanding exactly what you're getting into before you go and wrestle with it in the field, especially in those things. That's why if you go to a top-notch rifle school, some of the world-class stuff that maybe some of the civilians haven't had access to, and you can read about all this stuff too, and you can talk to the experts who put these schools on, but there's a huge classroom portion. For example, if you're going to go to field artillery school, or if you're going to go to a hard target interdiction school, for example, there's a lot of classroom time before they ever get you out there. Even in basic rifle management for regular soldiers, there's days of playing with the weapon, getting familiar with the weapon, dry fire drills. You lay the penny on the end of the muzzle, and then you got to practice, the squeeze, and it's got to click, and the penny can't fall off. There's days and days of that stuff. And it's not because they're stupid, but it's because there's just a certain fact of the matter that there's a lot of stuff going on in the subtleties that can be very easily corrected and more properly diagnosed in those circumstances. And likewise with extreme long-range rifle training, when you're talking about the complexity of ballistics or the internal bore dynamics, we talk a lot about the thermally activated zone. We talk a lot about the thermally affected zone, the chemically affected zone, and the mechanically affected zone inside the bore during bore erosion. The reason we talk about that in a classroom environment before we get people onto the range is so that when they come to the range, they don't have their rifle like over cleaned, okay? Or they're not surprised when they start building velocity during the hump of the barrel life. These are things these subtleties that I'm talking about are very, very important to know ahead of time before you ever really get out there. And that's why we spend a lot of time focusing in on the science part first. Also, it allows the shooters plenty of time to get out there ahead of time and get their equipment squared away and not mess it up. It's very easy when we're talking about those fine subtleties that really separate the boys from the men. Very easy to screw up those things, and it can cause you to waste a lot of ammo when you could have just had that one round. What I envision for when we get into some of the advanced range classes, like the really advanced ones, is a lot of guys also too, they're so anxious to want to get out and shoot. And that's awesome because I understand shooting is fun. But if you're seriously going to master something, you have to have more patience. And honestly, the classroom portion of the thing is kind of a filtration mechanism too. I think that we're filtering out, I don't want to say the wrong people, but I mean, there's different personality types, and maybe this particular style of shooting isn't for everybody. It requires a great degree of patience and maturity and understanding if you want to take it to that next level. So we pick up kind of where maybe some of the other courses leave off, which is fine. It's good to have that kind of information under your belt. If you've been shooting for a long time, or if you've got some formal instruction and you want to push the envelope to the next and you're plateaued and you want to push it to that next level, this is kind of what we're geared for, honestly. And for the first couple of classes, we took care of a lot of the Sniper 101 enthusiasts who have really been loyal over the years to the channel, to give them an environment where they can chew on it in person at a seminar format. And that's why we set it up the way we did. It's very, very important to give the people the opportunity to bounce those things off you. Because there's a lot of detail when you talk about how to set up your ballistic tables properly. How we're going to be implementing our proprietary firing system is totally different. They have to also understand the logic on why we implement firing systems the way we do for certain different circumstances. If someone shows up to a live fire course and hasn't had that explained to them ahead of time, and they didn't have the chance to go and really chew on it at home for a couple months, and play with the darn things before they get out there in the field, it's going to be just a waste of ammunition, in my opinion. So for the people who want to do the shooting part right away, I think that that's cool. Maybe there's a lot of other shooting schools that'll give you that style of training, and I think that those will be really good. They get you out there and they shoot a lot of rounds off, and you get to run around and try different firing positions. That's all very important stuff to know. And we will be doing that, but we're really picking up on a whole different dimension, a whole different harmonic, if you will, a whole different octave, okay? So I would strongly encourage people to really think about what they're doing in terms of shooting. Sometimes less is a lot more in terms of volume, right? It's all about quality and not necessarily quantity of times you've shot. Some guys, I mean, I've shot a lot of rounds in my life, to be honest, so I can't yell at them too much. I've probably shot maybe 1 million rounds. I don't know, like hundreds of thousands of rounds for sure. And but that's not what makes a guy really good at what he's doing. You can shoot off a lot of rounds and reinforce a lot of bad habits for a long time. But it's really about the quality of those rounds. And as you can see, and I'll release the entire video just in its raw form, but we took someone from absolute zero, complete basic level, and we focused in on the infinite complexity of the details as they're laying there in real time, and we got them coached through. And Miss Casey Day, for her first 3 shots ever in her whole life with a bolt-action rifle, laid them in there at solid 1 minute of angle. It's pretty good. You know, a lot of experienced reloaders and hunters and guys like this, you know, that's kind of their goal, to get that 1 minute of angle rifle. That's not bad, especially for your first 3 shots in your life. I mean, you think that first shot, you're going to be way the hell off and just completely scared, and she was. But we walked her through how to achieve those fundamentals. And if you take a look at the video, you're gonna know, if you're into the series, that there are some problems harmonically with that shooting position. But this is another example of how to properly implement which subtleties and which details at what time. For example, we're laying on the ground and the toe supports land on the shooting mat. And even just having a shooting mat there can cause harmonic problems at all, you know, as well. And we get into that when we get into the seminar series, and when we shoot out in the bush, you guys will see what we're talking about. But it's things like that. We would rather her not lay on a cactus and get eaten by ants, because that's gonna really screw up your natural lay of the rifle when there's freaking ants climbing into your pants and biting you, right? So that's just one example of sacrificing a little bit of harmonic soundness for a more comfortable shooting position. Now for dudes in the field, you know, I'd be more apt to make fun of them maybe, and it depends on the exact situation. I will use shooting mats all the time when I'm going to spend all day out there and I'm focusing on a different thing than trying to make a really good group, for example. So it's in understanding not just that those subtleties exist and that the details exist, but knowing when to implement them and not sacrifice those deals for different things. I think most of you know what I'm talking about. The ones who watch this video basically know what I'm talking about. But I guess a word for the cautious people and a word for the wise out there. When you get into our seminars, it's going to be pretty high speed. It's going to be a different level, but it's incredibly important. And I don't want anyone coming through the doorway into our level of training when we get to the live fires without having gone through that first. Even if you've watched all the videos, we're tying the ends of the knots together at the seminar and getting people actually ready equipment-wise and psychologically for how we're going to implement our proprietary firing system. It's different. It's a whole different system. It lays out all the variables on an X and Y axis mentally for you, rather than a linear way, which is going through a computer app or computer program, so that you can actually learn about the thing while you're doing it in a more field expedient way that also works with massive adrenaline dump on your brain. And we explain all this when we get to the seminar. But it's definitely for serious guys who really want to get into the next level. Actually, it should be a 2-week classroom portion before you get to the shooting part, in all honesty, if you want to get to that sort of shooting. And that's just the honest truth. But we compressed it into 2 days. The last couple were 2.5 days. We have another one coming up in California here that we trimmed down into 2 days, making it a little more logistically possible to present the class in the time frame we had. Probably might be the last seminar of the year. I don't know if we're even going to do any of those next year yet or not. We're still playing it by ear. There's a lot of other things on the table we got to take care of too. But if you want to get in on any of our future live fire stuff, which is what we're going to do after we finish these first couple seminars, is we're going to go through all the people who graduated from the seminar, and we're going to get them out there in the field. Anyone who wants to do it, we're going to get them out there in the field, and we're going to walk them through how to implement this firing system and make sure their tables are perfectly adjusted. That's one of them details that's hard to do even with experts. So we're going to have the experts who design all the system out there to get you squared away perfectly. And the objective here is going to be not to shoot thousands and thousands of rounds fast, like right away, just you show up at the class and start shooting. That's not how this works. We're going to make sure that you take that one cartridge and you put the bullet exactly where you want it to go the first time. So one of the drills I envision at some point in the training is I will hand you one cartridge, and you will take that and you'll take all your stuff to your firing position, and you'll lay down and you'll get everything absolutely perfect. And it's going to be a long range shot, something that's going to be difficult, but you're going to go through all the details and you're going to get it perfect on the first shot. Well, what about the wind? What about the cold bore? What about this stuff? That's why you need to go to the classroom part first, okay? Those things are way less of an issue if you implement all the details that we show you how to do, and if you're aware of these different things. And that's why we focus on some of the details in the degree of depth that we do. Not only in the Sniper 101 series that's available for totally free on YouTube, which I will still insist is free. A lot of people are trying to get me to sell that deal and take it off of there, but I want it to be for free because honestly, the supplementary material is super important for people to be able to have ahead of time. So if you graduate from the video series that's free online, hundreds of hours of that, and you can make it to a seminar where we can really sit down and explain to you exactly why these things are important and how they'll be implemented and how they'll be part of an integral system. We have your strategy down, your marksmanship fundamentals down, and the science down. It's going to be something that you need to have squared away before you showed up. So that's what I'm excited to get you guys out on the live fire range. That's going to be fun. We're going to give you a good chance too, because I realize a lot of you aren't going to be as familiar with the bolt action rifle as some of you. So we are going to do a lot of shooting when we get into the live fire class. So we're going to have Paul McCoy. He's really good at what he does. He's very well accomplished in the competitive shooting world. He's going to get you really squared away on how to get it done. Let you warm up the barrel, get some rounds downrange, and get you kind of primed up for the next level. Which after that, you'll see. It's going to be awesome. So I look forward to having you guys out there on the shooting, on the live fire course. And it's just been fun working with you so far. And if you guys have any questions about any of this stuff, and there's a little fuzzball floating around here. If you guys get any questions on how to implement any of these details, especially with the ballistic tables, be sure to give Colin Burns a call. He will get you squared away. And that's something you're going to want to have kind of set up ahead of time before we get on the range, even though we will be refining it out there. So if it's something that totally doesn't make sense to you, don't get scared yet, because when we get to the live fire, all the stuff that we talked about and introduced you to in the seminar will all of a sudden make sense when you're on the field. And we'll walk you through it step by step. So if we can bring Miss Casey Day from absolute zero to completely deadly in 10 minutes, imagine what we're going to do with you guys over the course of a couple days, right? So I'm excited to have you guys out there, and it's going to be fun. Tell your friends about it, and we look forward to seeing you again.
grabs the whole rifle. We were firing a 50 cal off that, and then he was